Hi, I'm Lauren Selden. I'm the professor of metalworking and jewelry at Stephen F. Austin State University. Today I want to show how to use the mild steel texture plates from Potter USA. Potter USA has a bunch of great videos on this that I would suggest watching. Lynette Andreasen has a bunch of great videos on this. So this is just mainly for my students in our classroom so that you've got an idea how to use our actual machine. Okay, so I'm squeezed in here on this side. My students will recognize this space so that you can see which side of the mill we're usually working on. So I have my pattern plate here and I have my annealed copper, and we're always really careful with our rolling mill. It's a really important tool to us, so I really slow down whenever I'm working with these tools. So this is mild steel, but you can mess up the plate, and I assume if you were doing things really wrong, you could mess up the mill. So I am being really smart whenever I'm using this stuff. My copper has been annealed and it's dry. I don't want to get anything wet steel because I want to prevent rust. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my mill. And I'm going to place my plate and the copper blank in, and then just going until it is tight. Since I have a measuring device up top, I'm going to actually go ahead and use that. So we have this little arrow here that I have pointed it to 0, and that gives me a way to be able to see where I'm going whenever I come back. Again, every mill is going to be different, and so as you watch other videos, they're going to show you kind of how to figure out the tension for the studio. So it's a bit of trial and error. So the next thing that I have to do, my piece is stuck in here, as you see. So the next thing that I have to do is I need to open up the rollers to let this out. So this is different than the way that I would show usually doing a roll press, where we back it out using the handle over there. So I've rolled it out. And then I need to go back to that measurement, which again, I had it at that 0. So let's try that one more time. Open, close. And then I moved this to 0 just so I can see it. And then I've opened it out to get my plate out, and then I've gone back to 0 tightness. Now if I put it through at that, it's basically going to give me a really mild press, but I'm not going to get a whole lot of detail. So I have found that doing this going to 2 and then tightening it down here, which is basically like I think a quarter turn. Let's see what that looks like. That was here. Yeah, so quarter turn seems like that's a good rolling. And then I'm going to move the camera so that you can see it coming out on the other side, but that's going to be my tension. So I'm going to open it up, close it down, and then I'm turning this to 0 so that I have the appropriate thickness. And then I've got to let it out. And remember, I'm letting it out up here instead of opening up those wheels there. So now I go back to 0. So that tightens it up. In order to get it the tightness so that this will push all the way through, I'm going to go to the 2, back it back out to 0. So I'm ready to go. Okay, so let's see how this goes. I don't want this too tight to where it warps the steel, but I don't want it too loose to where it doesn't press the metal. So that feels good. And then you can see here's my textured piece. I'm going to do one more start to finish with a different plate, a different piece of annealed metal, just so we can see it again. So I'm gonna act like I haven't been here with the plate. I probably could have just kept those same settings. Open up my rollers, tighten down, and I'm actually going until the copper just barely kind of pulls up, like it's nice and tight. I'm putting it to the 0 so I know where I've been. I have to back out to get my plate out. Go back to 0. And then again, it's a quarter of a turn, so however you want to do that. I'm going to the 2, back to the 0. There's my quarter of a turn. And there's my pattern piece. Again, you'll have a bit of warping as you go on your sheet, so just make sure that you use more material than what you need. Pattern the whole material. And we have all of our pieces here that have quite a bit of a curve to them. This one was a bit shallower on my pressure. It still is a nice piece. So I'm going to be on the face of my anvil here, and we leave our dead blow out sitting here. Remember that the dead blow has a nice clean rubber face, and so sometimes I still check that to make sure there's no metal stuck in there that would mar my piece. And in the dead blow, once it hits down, all the pressure is going down. So make sure that you're avoiding getting your fingers in there, because it will put full pressure on your fingers and usually break your fingers open. So I'm just going straight down. The pattern is face up so that I don't get all the nicks and stuff from my anvil into my beautiful pattern. Dead blow it down. And then depending on what I'm doing, I can anneal this, dead blow more. If I need it flatter, I can anneal it, and I can form this any way that I want, or sometimes I like to leave it really work hardened for my next stage. So there we go. Enjoy. So I'm going to go ahead and patinate those pieces of metal. And the things that I have prepared here is I have a chemical tray, I have a bowl with some really hot water in it. I usually like to get a Scotch-Brite that's really beat up, that has, you know, been scrubbed on a bunch of times. This one's pretty new. And then I grabbed a brass brush, and I put a little bit of Dawn in it and rinsed it in there just so that it is really nice and lubricated for a good finish. When you use the brass brush, you do not need to push hard. You'll see that in a second. And I also grabbed the liver of sulfur, and in our studio we store it in a small yellow flammables cabinet that's all the way on the other side of the room. And the only reason for that is because we're trying to avoid getting any water in here, and we need it to not be exposed to light. So there's some tweezers in here. So I have my gloves on, but they're perfectly dry. And I like to open this. I'm going to go ahead and turn on ventilation so that it doesn't smell. And I have safety glasses on and gloves. So you can see the little pieces in there. I actually rarely use these. I usually break these up with a hammer and make them smaller. I'm looking for the little bitty pieces like that. And then I'm going to put those into the water. So I don't need much for this particular thing. Remember, don't let any water get on the tools or on your hands. And then we're going to tighten this up. I usually push it down on the edge and close that whole tin. Put that and the tweezers back in the plastic bag, and then I put it to a table far away so that I don't get any water on it. So our solution is mixing up right now. We have some copper tongs. You can see that people are like always pushing on this. You don't need to push that hard. So here's the tongs. I'm just gonna stir this up. Now you could do like a bigger bath of this and lay these long pieces in it, but I usually don't do that. I just go ahead and take my Scotch-Brite over the material. That liver of sulfur needs to be agitated Remember, when you're patinating, you need to have clean metal. And then again, my water is warm or nice and hot. And so I can keep doing that. Again, if I had it in a bath, I can just leave it in there to soak if it's in a really long bath. But this works great. Again, if I want to use the brass brush is going to give you a shinier finish, and it's a little bit more kind of like that darker purple in color. You want to get past that rainbow stage of colors because that one's not it's not fully in there, and it's not as stable. So if you can kind of get to this purplish brown or dark, kind of gray, and that will really be nice and stable. So I'll go ahead and do all of these, and then whenever I'm happy with it, I'll quench it in cold water. I've come over to this sink. In our studio, there's a couple of options here. I like to use this quadruple zero fine steel wool. And we store ours over in the solder area closest to our exit, and mainly closest to our trash can. And I always ask them to pull the trash can over here so that you don't accidentally get steel all over the space that's close to where your pickle is. Just happens to be near here. So I just pulled off a little ball of that, and I'm going to work over the trash can, which you can see here. And then I also have another way of doing it at the sink. So I have already quenched these in cold water, and I was a good, community roommate, and cleaned up all of my liver of sulfur and everything. Got it ready for the next person. So one way to do this is just to just kind of go in circles and use steel wool. And that looks pretty good. And so then you can really see that texture. Another way that I usually do things is I take a piece of 600 grit sandpaper, and I might even use a piece bigger than this, and I like to get it wet. And then I keep it really, really flat on my pattern. So the wet part is going to make it where it's not quite as aggressive as using regular sandpaper. This is wet dry sandpaper, so it's what it's meant to do. And then I'm just pressing over the top. The reason why I might prefer this on some patterns is because I might have like a bunch of detail that I'm afraid that the steel wool might get too far down. So sometimes I'll still steel wool it after I've gotten that general top done. Now, mind you, we probably wouldn't be just finishing these sheets. We'd be making something out of the sheets, and then this is the finishing technique later. So again, back to that brass brush. We had the brass brush that had some Dawn soap on it. I can also hit the piece with that, and that gives it a really beautiful shiny finish. And then I'll show all of these at the very end. So same thing, wet dry sandpaper. I like that for these detailed ones because I really want to keep the black of the liver of sulfur on the areas that are recessed. Woo, these are so pretty. Thank you to Potter USA for all of the good designs. They've got some great people working there that are taking care of this stuff. Okay. So again, here's the finished results with the plates. Really pleased with that. And you should be making stuff with this, so you're not going to just have sheets of this. Okay, I hope you enjoyed. Remember, we only have one rolling mill, so be kind to it. imagine many of you at home are similar. Be smart, slow down, make sure that you're following the right steps, have fun, use this stuff in your work.